Clint,
Colette,
how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Busy, as usual, but not quite as stretched thin as last time we recorded.
That's good news. You still have Are We Up Now behind you.
Still stretched thin enough that I haven't thought of another thing to put up. I have like a little notepad with ideas, and I doodle on them, and they keep coming back to our favorite topic, MTTR, and I don't like. I still need a break from talking about it. Um, but I still feel that way too. Like I right here, I'm on call this week, so right here I have the dashboard for the database right there. It's just comforting to see the line flat.
Yeah, I feel like we have an MTTR episode coming for us at some point, but today is not that day.
Definitely not today. Yeah.
Uh, I'm packing up my life. Uh, I'm putting together donation bags full of lots of things that my children have worn or played with in the last 2 years.
All the
Um,
reminiscing happening.
yeah, it's pretty nuts. Um, but yeah, other than that, I'm just trying to meditate. I've discovered, well, I've been doing this for a while, but I've sort of rediscovered it now that I have a little bit more time on my hands, which is sensory deprivation chambers.
I remember you talking about those
Floating.
years ago.
Yeah. So I started floating when I lived in Portland, Oregon, because there's like this really awesome like float center that had at the time, like this was like 12, 13 years ago, it had like 8 or 9 tanks, I want to say, and like different styles of tanks, like some were like kind of open air. But for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, there are lots of different ways to do it, but floating is essentially like throwing a bunch of Epsom salt, like hundreds and hundreds of pounds of Epsom salt in water to make it neutrally buoyant with your body. And then like having that water in a place that's very dark and totally like warm so that everything is like exactly the same temperature as your body, and essentially like you just get into a tank and you float there, and it's very like restorative and pretty nuts. So
Every time you describe it, I'm like, oh yeah, I need to schedule one of those. But at this point, I think the last time we talked about it was like 2017. So I still haven't gotten into that float chamber, but
if
gosh, it
you ha-
sounds nice. It
yeah,
sounds
if you
nice.
haven't done it, it's worth a try. I mean, I have people tell me that they're worried because they're claustrophobic or something. Like I have never had a problem, but that doesn't mean that, I'm sure there's some people who do. But I just find it it like forces my body to relax. So it's pretty great. So that's what I've been doing, floating and packing.
Wow, quite a bit. But I guess it's that time. You're not a green screen yet, are you?
I'm not a green screen yet. No, this is my real background still.
Yeah.
Um,
I've been bringing a new member of our family into the house. We have a crayfish now. So, we talked about our turtle.
in the turtle tank,
And no, no.
separate
Turtles will
tank.
eat crayfish. They love crayfish
Oh, I
almost as
didn't know
much as
that.
we do. Right? That's like a battle that the crayfish always loses unless it can hide. But no, it's in its own little tank. My daughter, like her science teacher, brought in some crayfish for them to study, and they kind of used it as part of their life science. And at the end, the
Oh,
teacher's like, "These crayfish don't really have a home. Does anybody want them?" And my daughter was like, so she brought home like a little Tupperware with a crayfish in it. It was like
hmm.
this big, and as soon as you went up to it, it would like raise its claws, and they're super aggressive. They're super fun to watch.
Huh.
They and I actually thought Friday it like went into its cave, and it's been like fun for like a week. It's like we built a aquarium, and like it's been in there, and we've been watching it and feeding it, and it's so much fun. And then Friday it just like went into its cave, and it like got dark in color, and it just like hunkered down. And I read in there like, well, it probably is sick. And I'm like, oh man, like we just had this for a week. The crayfish is gonna die. And over
Oh.
the weekend, it was just like I could see its little feelers wiggling in there, but it wouldn't come out, and that was very uncharacteristic. But then I read it, I was like, well, it could be molting.
Ah.
And this morning there was a crayfish and a ghost crayfish.
Oh,
It
wow.
molted, and it's amazing how much bigger it got just from molting. It's like it was like busting out. So, and
Wow.
now it's in there just snacking on its old skeleton, which is gross, but that's what
Ooh.
they do because it's like they need calcium to like
Yeah. Yeah.
so it was a roller coaster of a weekend. I was like trying to
Wow.
get ready to like tell my daughter like, well, crayfish they don't live that long, and now it's like Gooby's her name. Gooby's bigger now, so very
That's
exciting
so
weekend.
cool.
Yeah,
Wow. Life finds a way.
definitely. Yeah, but we thought we might have an incident,
Yep. But it turned out, was it an incident?
and I did some response actions. I
Was it an
did.
incident?
I was like, maybe there's not enough oxygen in the tank. So I went and got a bubbler, even though all my calculations said, no, one thing in the tank, enough surface area, you don't need a bubbler. I added a bubbler. Probably didn't need to. But yeah, I treated
Mm.
it, like an incident that we needed to respond to.
Which is
Is
a great
that
seg.
segueing?
It's just us today. We have
Yeah.
a good question. We have a question. I think we were talking about this earlier that often gets discussed in the sort of informal circles of resilience engineering community, but I don't know that like I've ever seen a talk on it, or I don't know that I've ever seen. I think there are probably some papers on like actually. I'll get to this when we ask the question, but I do know a Lund thesis was somewhat related to this, at least one. So,
There should be at least
um,
one.
but I think it's a question that a lot of people have that's fair, and I also think it's a really good entry question into this world that we live in now, this resilience engineering world. So so someone wrote in a great question. I'm going to read it. What are the politics around what is or isn't an incident? Is there any good reason to actually avoid making an incident? How do you dig into it with your organization when people are clearly avoiding declaring more incidents? What kinds of supportive data would you collect? How do you show them that it's okay and results in more safety too, not less? Interesting
There's a lot
choice of
there.
the concept safety too. But um yeah. What do you think, Clint? How do you
I
what
mean,
are the politics?
I feel like this one, we always have like a pretty, like, if you're like a pure resilience engineering shop, which doesn't exist. But like if we were all sitting around and it was just you and me and some Lund graduates at a company, we just say, well, if you're asking the question, it's an incident, right? That's like our conceptual, like what we lean on is, of course, you always declare one because you don't know and you don't know what you don't know. But I know like that the word politics in there is kind of a key that I think what our question asker is looking for is more about the meaning of what once you have declared one, like what how do I manage what comes from that, because it means something different to people who are not us. It means something different to almost everybody. So like I get that. My definition, I love, there's like a bunch of definitions of incidents. My favorite one is that an incident is when an expert thinks there's something wrong,
Mm.
like just keeping it as simple as possible. Like that's what conceptually it is. But then politics come in when like the management says, "Oh, but something's wrong." Like, what did you do?
I mean, so one of my favorite definitions actually came when I worked at Cognite. Someone was talking to me, worked at Cognite. It's really smart. Was like, I like to say that an incident is when somebody feels that there's an increased risk to the business than
Yeah,
like your average humming along,
that's
right?
got some nice political rhetoric in it. I like
I do.
that.
I like it too because I think it's also like, here's the thing, right? And I might, if I pick a little bit at your definition, does somebody feel like they have to be an expert in something in order to call an incident? Or can they see the results of something that they don't understand, that they're not expert in, and say, I'm going to declare an incident because this feels like an increased risk to the business? Whatever the problem is, I don't know what it is, or I'm not expert in this. Um,
Yeah, that definition definitely leans a lot on what resilience engineering's version of an expert is,
yeah.
right? Because experts are people with context
Hmm.
that have experience, and like expert, context and experiences, it makes one, but we don't think of that way. Our bosses don't think of that way.
Mm-mm.
An engineer one has been with the company for 6 months, has shipped a few changes, is now on call.
Hmm.
They would be like, "Are you sure they're an expert?" Like that doesn't sound like an expert. But if you said, "Well, we just trained them to like detect risks, like we think not risk is in these bars," and they saw something outside those bars, you could maybe make that argument to them.
Yeah. I how often, this is a loaded question. How often do you think that people like interrupt their work, go fix a thing, but never call an incident?
Oh gosh. I mean, that used to be me a lot more than it is now. And I still do it. For sure. Like as an engineer who's working on a system, I'll have like this little funny, like, it's like, I should declare. Maybe I should declare an incident. No, I know what to do. And this goes back to something Lauren Hochstein has said a few times. You can't judge the riskiness of a decision by its outcome, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'll do that, and then it works out, and I never tell him. I never tell anyone. Or maybe
Right?
I'll be like, "Hey, I fixed this thing. Look at this, y'all. It's great." And then we have like a half-hour discussion in the next stand-up, and we're like, "Well, maybe we should have done an incident there. Like there was probably a lot to learn from that one line change that you shipped urgently." And definitely, I think it happens a lot, and
Yeah.
I personally, like, I think I just did this last week. So, like, I was like, "Oh, there's no index on that query. Like, that's eating the database. I'm gonna ship that index right now." Not thinking like, actually, this has been dragging database performance down, and the system was almost broken because of it. So yeah, I think that's a really common thing that happens, and this is where the politics is
Mm.
like not working in our favor, right? That would be a great opportunity to explain to management, like, there were risks, we got ahead of them, no impact to users. But I've noticed that sev scale comes into play there, and
Mm.
management does not usually want to hear about sev fours, right? Like, sev four, who cares? Like, no one called me. They're not coming to that retro.
So is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I think it's an unfortunate thing, and it's a lot of what our good friend John Allspaw will talk about, how why you can't count incidents, because there's so many of those preventing incident actions that are taken all the time that don't get
Right.
declared, where the system is approaching a boundary that's maybe not well defined but is in some expert's head, and then they've created safety, and we don't talk about it.
Yeah,
It's
it's
like,
not visible to
yeah,
anybody. Like, I think that to me is what is, as somebody who's kind of operated in a management layer for a while, like what's scary to me is all of the things like that happen where it's like there are all these opportunities for somebody to share the knowledge in their head with other people on their team or other people across teams or something, and like we're just constantly it's like we're constantly missing out on that. And I think it's like it makes perfect sense to me why somebody wouldn't call an incident. Like the paperwork the paperwork alone, right? If you don't have one of the nifty automation tools, how many steps does it take to call an incident? And then how many steps after you call the incident are you required to take to close it out according to the like whatever process requirements that are put on you? And like what I've seen a lot of is like I think when I was at Cognite, when I got there, like there was a requirement that every single incident that got called needed to have a retro.
yeah,
And the staff engineer who was there, Yelmer, is super awesome. He was like, "We're gonna nix that rule. Like, are you supportive of that?" And I was like, "Absolutely. Don't need to have a retro. Like, let's do less requirements for incidents." Lo and behold, suddenly we had more incidents. Did we really have more incidents? No, they were going on all the time. It's just that like people didn't see the value in having to spend all of that extra time doing the incident if they could just get away with like, fixing it and moving on, right?
It's so true. Paperwork, it's always playing a factor in this because I remember when we did our ethnographic study at Spotify, which I spoke about at SRECon. One of the things that we found was that a lot of the pushback, a lot of the reasonings when we interviewed people about like what they were doing was like, I don't like if you make me enter start and end times, I'll do it, but that just adds to toil and it
Yep.
makes incidents a drag on me, and that's going to get you less declares. You're going to get more people doing what I did, which is just shove the change out and hope for the best. And if it goes poorly, then we'll go to the Sev 2 and get attention and help. Whereas what you want is like, something smells weird. I'm going to put the flag up just a little bit, like there's an incident, and we'll see how it goes. And if it ends in a Sev 4 and it was a near miss, and you could just write up a little thing and ship it and not have to have all of these post-incident sign-offs. I got hit with that the other day. There was some folks wanting to have sign-offs on retros, not just have the retro, but we need to make sure that this staff engineer and this person signs up on every retro that we're involved in. And it was sort of like, oh, I mean, more that's your deal, but it's closed. We had the meeting, we recorded it, we wrote down what we learned. We did the thing, but adding more and more and more, like, definitely starts to make not the politics, but the practical nature of incidents become untenable.
Yeah. You hit on an interesting thing there, which is like and I don't know that they're necessarily always correlated, but, or I guess like even correlated or caused or whatever, but you talked about Sev 2s and asking for help. And the Lund paper, the thesis by Michael Weddick, who is in my class at Lund, is about how do software engineers decide when to ask for help. And it's sort of like, do people, I have this sort of question in my head of like, it's worth reading Michael's thesis, by the way, about this. I'll put links to it in the show notes, but this idea of like, do engineers use incidents as a way, like the mechanism of an incident as a way of asking for help, as like a functional, like, I'm going to hit the red button because I've decided I can't solve this on my own. And if they feel like they could solve it on their own, then it's not an incident, right? Like in my head, I'm sort of like, is that an interesting formulation to play with for how people think about it?
That's interesting, and it kind of crosses in with with Laura Morgan's thesis around cost of coordination, right?
McGuire.
Like,
yes.
What's that? McGuire.
Laura
sorry.
McGuire.
Morgan's,
Yeah.
Laura Morgan's
Morgie's. Yeah.
Yeah, Morgie. Hi, Morgie. I hope you're listening. But Laura McGuire's thesis on cost of coordination, where like essentially when the cost of coordination is zero, which is one person can take full actions on their own and they feel that way and they don't feel like they need to wait, then maybe the incident is the mechanism by which we engineer our coordination costs.
Right.
That would make sense to me. And it's definitely like, having had incident commander training and been an incident commander in both high and lower severity incidents, until you've done that, I was just recommending to my team, by the way, hey, you should take a turn on the incident manager bandwagon when you're an SRE. It really helps. You don't realize how much stuff you need help with. And that is a big part of incidents too, is you think you need help figuring out the system. And that happens. And you definitely I can't fix this myself. I'm going to declare and then page someone, right? Which is the actual getting help. But that feels like you need to declare it because it's not going well and the users are probably going to start calling, right? You need help dealing with the users and you need help communicating with the stakeholders. And it starts to become untenable for somebody who's just trying to figure out what to
fix a thing. Yeah.
So yeah, you're getting help. I think framing incidents as getting help isn't a terrible idea in my mind right now.
Yeah. I mean, I think ultimately, what prevents people Like if I had to guess based on all of the casual conversations we have around this in the community, you know, people don't declare incidents because they think that they've got it all covered. They think that it's just a small thing. They think that they understand, or because they're scared to ask for that help, right? They're scared. So they might DM somebody in Slack and be like, hey, this thing is going on, and can you check this change, or can you do this thing, or can you come look at this with me? Still might not be an incident, right? They've still got it under control in the sense that they know who to reach out to and they know it, like, right? But they won't declare an incident if they don't feel safe, like if they don't feel like the outcome of that will help them both like politically in the organization, right? If they feel like they'll be looked down upon for declaring, um, and if they're worried that they need to appear like they know everything, right? I see a really interesting anti-pattern that I see quite a lot actually is people running incidents mostly through DMs where, you know,
Yeah.
nobody's actually talking in the incident channel or the bridge, but instead they're just kind of like damning one another, like all the different troubleshooting that they're doing on their things, right?
Yeah.
That's such a it's such a symbol of people being afraid to talk about what they do or don't know in front of one another, right?
Yeah. And it's actually, it cuts the other way too. So that's like a crisis of confidence,
Right.
right? Which I think is true. Like, I don't want eyes on me because I don't really know. Like, this is evidence that I don't know how the system works.
Mhm.
And then I've had it go the other way where they're not joining calls and not participating in the incident because they think they know better than the response team.
Mm.
It definitely, this is rare, but I've had it happen twice where someone is like, whatever incident commander, I have already fixed the system. Like,
Ooh, so they're like
I'm
running
not
a
joining.
parallel incident response. That's
Yeah, like,
interesting.
because like they don't want the scrutiny on what they're doing because they don't, honestly, they didn't have, in both instances these individuals didn't have people skills, but like they also just knew that it was going to be a whole thing, right? And they could, even though there was an incident, they were still like, I'm going to stay under the covers because I think I can resolve it faster that way. And in a way, they're saying the cost of coordination is too high for me. I
Yeah.
don't want to participate. I'm going
Yeah.
to just do things.
Yeah.
And it's not the right thing in my opinion, but like it speaks to, there must be like a Goldilocks zone for control or influence over the cost of coordination versus like complete chaos, right? There's a Goldilocks zone that we want people to find themselves in, where declaring feels easy and where participating in all that comes with it feels scaled. And as I'm saying this, I'm just saying like that this is another one of those like things we'll never get right, but we have to try to get as close as we can.
Yeah. I mean, look, people aren't going to do things that they don't feel like they're going to get rewarded for doing, right? And whether that reward is more knowledge about the systems or whether that reward is like your VP throwing you a pizza party because you've had, 100 Sev threes declared this month, which, I don't know. I don't know what it is, right? But I think like, why do people, this person asks like, how do you dig into it with your organization when people are clearly avoiding declaring more incidents? I mean, I think you have to look at what people are doing in the true resilience engineering fashion. You have to look at what people are doing. Like, so what are they doing, because whatever they're doing makes sense for them. They're getting rewarded for that, whether that's by avoiding extra process, whether that's by avoiding a line of fire question from a VP that they don't want to have to deal with if they declare it, right? There's something rewarding about what they're currently doing that's helping them. And you can only understand what's getting in the way when you look at like what they're actually doing, I think. you know
Yeah, this one hits pretty hard for me because I feel like I've tried so many different little things and I always either feel silly or overbearing in trying to do these rewards. One of the better cultures, right? We both worked at Spotify a little bit. Like that culture has a very generative root,
Yes.
like at its
Yeah.
core. Like you take it down to Daniel Ek and talking about like learning how to play instruments as a kid,
Yeah.
it sprouts through the company.
Yeah.
And as a result, like it was pretty easy to find a reward that everybody liked. It was just for us, it was incident story time. We called it that,
Meh.
and it was we're going to get the directors and senior directors and VPs in a room, and you got 3 minutes to tell your story, and they're
Mhm.
going to be cool about it, right?
Mhm.
And that was such a virtuous cycle where at first it was like we got like one or two people, and then after a while it's like, sorry, we already have eight. Like we only have
Mhm.
20 minutes for this meeting. like
Right.
but that
But people
reward was
wanted to tell the stories.
you get
Yeah.
time to tell your story, and
Yeah.
the reward wasn't just them telling it, but this is senior leadership validating, like,
Right.
yes, you're
Hearing
doing
you.
your job,
Yes.
well
Yeah.
done, we like to
Yeah.
see you doing that.
Yeah.
And I think that takes a lot more than just, unfortunately, like I'd love to be, here's a sticker, but it's
Right.
a little more than
But
that.
if somebody thinks they're going to get pounded over the head with, well, did you finish your 20 action items? And did you check all of these boxes afterwards to like fill out your forms and do all of your meetings? And it's like people they're not going to do it.
Yeah.
Like they don't have time for that. And I also think it's like one thing I hear a lot. It's funny. I just sounded like some of the people who like to rag on me when I'm in forums debating about learning from incidents and how they don't have time for it, right? And I think it's like, if your organization can start making the space for real learning to happen, doesn't have to be for every incident, shouldn't be for every incident, but if it can make the space for learning and for that more generative space, right, around, okay, well, what's really happening on the ground? How do we dig into this and understand ourselves and our world? If that space is being made, I think that that is really helpful for allowing people the permission to declare all kinds of things, Sev 3s, Sev 4s, all the sorts of things where it's like, you know what? I don't know if what I'm about to do, this little database index thing or whatever is like matters, but I'm going to call it an incident. I might not even call anybody else into it, but I'm going to tag it with some data so that in case we're counting database related incidents over the course of something and somebody wants some information about it, there's a knowledge base for them to call upon, right? Understanding that you are a font of knowledge and like you're trying to put more information out there for people to get related to it.
Yeah, it's like an excuse to write a good story.
Right.
Like, I think that not every incident has a cool reason or story, right? But when they do, like, I hope most engineers have had that moment where they're like, I cannot wait to tell my team about this. Like, this is so weird, right?
Mm-hmm.
I love that feeling. Like, and that's one of the reasons I got into the resilience stuff too, is like, how do we tell these stories more broadly than our teams? But I think like that's another reward, right? Like, and if your company's going to put a bunch of penalties essentially
Mm-hmm.
in that aren't worth that reward, you'll just tell your team and you will not declare them. And I think we always have to like be mindful of how much we're putting on each incident responder. I think I had a slide on this on SREcon a couple of years ago where I added like all the things that we ask incident responders to do, and it just kept adding and adding and adding. And then I ended it with the Monty Python joke. Now we see the violence inherent in the system. And I think it is inherent. Like
Yeah.
there's just, we will be in a learning from incidents mode and we'll be like, it'd be so good if we had tags, right? Or it would be so good if we added a post-incident task to our automation in incident.io that does this, right?
It's so much work. It's so much work for the people who are trying to deal with the problem at hand, though. And like, here's the other thing, right? I'm going to go out on a limb and say maybe it's okay that a bunch of things aren't declared as incidents, and maybe there are other ways to mine information from the people who are managing all of this stuff, keeping all of these juggled balls in the air. Like, find other ways to have them share their stories and their knowledge and their expertise, other than making them go through a bunch of process. Like, is there some other way we can do that, right?
That's an interesting point. Like in the past, in smaller orgs, I've never seen this work well in big orgs. We've had things like lunch and learns, and where it's like uh, once a month or every other week or something. Like invite people to tell other people what they should know, right? Just like here's something you should know, or here's something you might be interested in, and maybe that's a relief valve for those moments of like, I was looking at the database server and I saw that it was doing this. Check this out, right? But like, we don't need an incident for that. But I don't know.
I
I feel bad right now. Just what we just said. I'm gonna like dissonance has arrived. Like, uh, I want everybody to always feel okay declaring. Like, I'd rather have people declare and cancel than,
Yeah. I
and
mean,
that
look,
should be okay too.
yes. I don't think, but I think, what this person is saying is like they know they're in an organization where people are avoiding declaring more
Yeah.
incidents, right? And I think that there's a gradient that you're going to get to where you're satisfying the needs of your management chain that want to track things with data and have processes in place and require action items and all of that shit, with the missed value that is occurring, is falling to the bottom of the floor, that is escaping the sort of way that because you also know incidents can generate value because they're shared experiences and of people troubleshooting systems, essentially, right? And like, what I'm saying is like, I think that there is a world where you can access some of that value without necessarily making those people declare incidents. Yes, would it be great to try to convince your management chain not to require action items or not to require a postmortem for every single, you know, uh, incident that gets declared, all of that stuff, right? Like, we're within 48 hours. Like, what the hell is that, man? It's just like there's a lot. And like, I do think that they have reasons for doing it, right? And you're going to have to get to the bottom of those and understand where it's helping and where it's hurting. But in the meantime, I want to challenge the idea that you need a structure of an incident to learn from one.
I agree. I agree with that. Like the need word is still out there. Yeah. I
Mm-hmm.
think that we want people to want
Mm-hmm.
what the structure is offering. And I don't think there's any one piece of data that's going to satisfy us in resilience and leaders who are far from the problems
Yeah.
that will say that that's happening, right? But I do think it's worth trying. Like, um, like counting incidents, we know has problems, right? For all the reasons we've just stated. One of the things I remember, and I don't remember where I read this, but it influenced me was also uh, like incident response is improv, right? It's improvisation. And the only way to get good at improvisation is to do improvisation, right?
Mm-hmm.
That relaxing into it and getting into a different mode, right? That's why people do improv before performances, right? Because it helps them like let go of the real world and start to get into a different space. And in a way, incidents are like that. And I remember thinking like one of the reasons you declare the SEV4 and you just get into the call and you invite the incident commander to take charge is just that we don't do this that often,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
showing management, hey, we're getting good at that. That is value.
I also think, I don't know, I'm going to throw in, I really love, shout out to incident.io who like shows when they call incidents like related to like a certain snack not being in the snack machine at the office, right? Like, could be value for like declaring incidents that are like non-technical in nature and like having a like, fun, cultural, um, moment about it at work. And that's because like, I think that it helps people get over their fear of what happens when they start to ask for help or say that something's,
You know,
higher risk.
I love that. One of the things we did on this at again at Spotify was we did this Incidents and Dragons game where we just I think everybody, like a lot of people have that name even, but we did a tabletop exercise and we tried to simplify it. It wasn't like a full AD&D stack, but we had dice and we had characters and it was fun. And people would get hung up on the technical response part of it. They would be like, but I don't know anything about databases. Why am I a database expert? I would love to do a tabletop exercise where we're just practicing incident command with something that doesn't make any sense to anybody who's involved.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's like how improv games work.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what gets people to see the structure of whatever you're clowning in an improv game, but the structure of what you're trying to pantomime.
Yeah.
Without getting pulled into all of the content.
Which which brings us to the structure of incident command, and is that itself off-putting for people, right? I think there is this we've I can link to them as well, but BlackRock 3 is a trainer that we've worked with quite a lot, and they're all sort of from the sort of fire safety, ambulance safety, like
they're all
more emergency services.
I think, right?
I think they're emergency services response experts, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of incident response in the technical world is really based on that model. And I've always wondered, like, does it have to be that way? Like, I think it works really well. I obviously, I've sent people to BlackRock 3 training a lot. So it's not like I don't buy into it, but I've always wondered, I was like, how did that come about? Like, who made that decision? What are the other options? Are there any? Like, I mean, maybe the answer is no, but I'm curious, like, also about like the cultural imperatives around incident response. Like, how do incidents get handled in different cultural paradigms? And are there differences there?
I feel like I think a lot of us just, spent a few years wanting to be firefighters, maybe as children. And it's cool to get to hang out with a real firefighter. That was for me.
Yeah.
But just like now there was one based on astronaut training. But actually it would make sense, right? Mission control.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah,
these are serious jobs, right?
Yes.
And pretending to be serious is not what the point is, but it's like figuring out, like, incidents can be very, very serious, and and you don't know at the beginning whether or not they are. Just like when the fire captain arrives with their engine at the tree, is it a cat in the tree, or is it an inferno? Like, they have limited information to know all of the what it is. We're in the same boat, so paying attention to how they break that down and how they keep people moving quickly, because time matters. I think that's why we look to them for help. But I agree with you that, like, our wonderful creative developers who are in there working on code and making front ends and doing all these beautiful creative work, like, it may be pretty off-putting to have an incident commander be like, Glenn Byram, incident commander, what's your report? Like 10 minutes.
Well,
all this,
it's
like,
also
serious
very
language.
different, right?
Yeah.
It's very different. It's like a very different environment to operate in, and I think a lot of people aren't used to it. And I think a lot of people who haven't worked in environments where you're used to having folks who are trained and who are like, it can sometimes be hard to see the value in it if you don't participate in it a lot and sort of come to understand why do people work this way? Why is this kind of the most important aspect of how we run these things? So I really recommend training. I think, like, it's been really helpful for, like, deciding who can do incident command, who wants to learn more about it, and rewarding the people who do. Like, making sure that they feel like they're part of something cool and like iterating on it and improving on it, because it can be really valuable to the organization when you have people who treat it like it's a separate level of expertise that it is, you know?
Yeah, and having done it now for a while, people who were completely unfamiliar with it reach out usually after almost every time, almost universally, and are like, "Thank you for doing whatever that was," like, right? Like, because it's mostly, and this directly comes from the training. It's
Right.
that we are at work, we're doing work. This is not an emergency. This is an
Right.
incident.
Mhm.
That distinction and that reframing, like,
Mhm.
is another benefit, a reward for declaring an incident.
Yeah.
Is you are panicking, you are the person, you are the responder, you're calling 911. My computer is on fire, right? I don't know how to get it out. Can someone send help? Right? If the person who arrives is like, just step back, like, oh, stay right there, like I might need you, right? But then we're going to deal with this. It's like, oh, blood pressure goes down, like
Yeah.
things happen, like that help is needed. So, that, I think, I wonder about our question asker. Like, what they didn't include is how effective they feel their incident response is
Right.
now and what they're getting out of it. Like I said, what they're doing
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
But I would guess, just based on long experience of just a complete constellation of incident response practices and results, that constantly is also changing, even at companies that are doing it well today. They may
Right.
not be in a year. Like, part of what you may not have done yet is actually having a really decent incident management program
Right.
that actually just can speak to management and say, this is valuable, and here's why, and here's what to expect.
Yeah. And again, I think the politics around that are, in particular, incident command needs to be valuable to management and it needs to be valuable to the people who are working the incident. Like, it needs to provide value to the organization broadly. And once you have that value and you're improving it over time, I think then you might also see, if you take that iterative approach, a way to help people be willing to declare more incidents when they want that help, when they can access that value, right?
Definitely. But we have left a big hole with that.
Mm.
And we still don't know how to tell our question asker how to measure this.
Supportive data would you collect? What kind of supportive data would you collect? I mean, well, we know we're not going to tell you to collect MTT.
What am I going to say? You brought it up.
So, look, I think understanding if nobody's calling incidents right now, that's really hard data to collect. I remember immediately counting incidents once we ended the retro requirement because in my head, more incidents being declared was a good thing. So I just wanted to know that the number went up, and it did. It did. And so that made me feel like that was the right decision, right? And what I would say is like the supportive data to collect is around that you want to do is you want to say, okay, this is examine how things are now. Have like a qualitative map that like describes what is involved in having an incident. What are the requirements on somebody? Do some interviews like casually with people, keep them anonymous, ask them, why would you declare an incident or why wouldn't you? Hypothetically, like get that information, right, in a qualitative manner. And then if you're going to experiment with changing the process or training people or, creating a role of incident command to help organize things a little bit better, I think like that's worth that's worth taking. Okay, if we do this thing, we hypothesize that more people will declare incidents, we'll get better information about what's going on, and it will generate X value because leaders will feel more informed and people who are working on incidents will feel more supported, right? those are feelings. Like, you're going to have to do surveys. Ask
Yeah,
people how they feel, you know. Um,
sentiment does matter. I think it's actually a good place to start. Like it's not all that hard to, as long as it's kept fairly simple.
mhm.
Sentiment analysis, like done, cheaply and continuously for a little time. I think we heard Fred Herbert talk about how they do it at
Mhm.
Honeycomb a little bit, and I've always thought that that would work out. I haven't done much of it, um, but it always feels a little empty to us, right? Like we're like, oh, okay, great, people feel good about it.
You want those stats.
Is that enough? And one of the things that I've always wondered about is, when we're like making a product to put out to the general public, where it's not really clear, like product market fit, we're not sure how we know what the goal is, and we know they reach us somehow. We don't know how we go through that. We always have that funnel model, right? So you want to increase the top of the funnel, and then you start figuring out how people drop down in the funnel. One of the problems is the goal metric is very hard to define. It's
Mhm.
learning, right? Like I think, is it?
Is
I don't
it?
know. Is
Or
it
is it
learning?
satisfied? I don't know. Is everybody just feeling better? Like, I do think sometimes that this is like vibes. It's vibes. It's vibes
Yeah,
from all kinds of, people in the puzzle. Like, it's not just vibes from developers or vibes from leadership or vibes from management, or like, you kind of have to take everybody's. I think customer support is a huge source of, like, is customer support getting the information they need in order to, like, there's a ton of different angles for you to tackle. You could work for years on improving your incident response to help tweak the satisfaction of various uh, stakeholders in your world, right? You
that's
could
so
just
true.
focus on that. Uh,
Yeah,
and I think that it's a collective vibes. It's like, would a new starter come in and like talk to five different types of people at the company and ask how incidents are going? And you'd want them to be like, yeah, they're pretty good. Here's how we do it. Here's how things work. Here's an example of one that we ran recently. Like, you want people to have those vibes rather than like, oh God, like, don't get me started on
yeah,
incidents. Like,
yeah.
it's just the worst, you know?
Yeah, that's that's a great sentiment analysis. Just how many words do you give when asked how are incidents here? Like, I think it speaks a lot. If you see it like a sigh and like I don't really do that much. That's not great. Yeah, it is just vibes. And actually, you mentioned support, right? I think we leave them out of this conversation a lot.
Yeah.
And one of the things that happened in an incident recently that I was commanding, I was like coming in late. Like the team was super inexperienced, and they took a long time to declare, and they took a long time to get incident command. And like the first thing support said as soon as I joined and took the role was like, "Can we please get something on the status page so we can get some relief?"
Right.
Right?
Right.
And I realized like this is the people doing the response just didn't know that the status page even
They had
exists.
no
Maybe
idea. Yeah.
they're not sure that it should go up. Like they probably thought maybe we could do that, but we're busy. Like
Or also,
so,
if we do that, is a customer going to get mad, or is it going to make it
yeah,
worse for support? Right. I think that's another question too, right? Is that
yeah.
people must have in their head.
But ultimately,
So
like now you're not just talking about the vibes in the company, right? It's
yeah.
also for the vibes out. And
Hmm.
like if you can talk to the customers and say, how do you think this company does incidents, right? And if they're like, I don't know, I haven't really seen many, that might be a good response.
Yeah.
But the support people will know. They will know. They'll probably have your most interesting answer when you do your sentiment analysis. Is go ask support. Make sure you ask the people who talk to the customers every day, like
Yep.
what they think of our incident response, because they're so often forgotten. We just want to get it back up, and we want to get the RCA done, and
Hmm.
we want to get the move on the technical level, right? But the politics actually, the people like smoothing over the financial impact of incidents often starts at the customer support and like account representatives and even the salespeople. They have to deal.
Yeah. And I mean, I've seen people try to quantify the dollars, right? So that's a thing you can do, right? You can quantify dollars lost to customer retention issues, or if you happen to run a thing where being down, costs you money, a particular measurable amount of money per minute or something, feel free, like, fine. But I think ultimately, um, the customers are going to leave, uh, customer support people are going to feel overburdened and overworked and tired, and engineers are going to be confused and unhappy, right? All of those things will be true if stuff is bad. And so, how do you figure out what you want them to be, and how do you help them get there? That's like, you can measure that. You can measure whether you've arrived, and you can certainly measure whether you're on your way, right? It's got to be qualitative to some degree, but you can do it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And it, it may not get better. Like this is the thing, the quibble we have with MTTR. It may not actually get better for any of those people, right? But what the incident command training taught me, at least, and I think resilience brings in, is that it at least gets conversation, right? It gets a space. Like, okay, we may not be good at making databases or making widgets or shipping
mhm.
on time software, whatever your incidents involve, but we at least have like a conversation. We understand what is going on. We understand what we're bad at is better than where you're at, where you're not declaring.
Yeah.
And
And
your
you don't know
management is like, what the
what's
hell's
really
going
going on.
on?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm getting calls from customers. Why is there no incident?
Yeah.
Or I'm
I do
getting,
think it's true that to some degree, when you first start getting better at this, it gets more painful for
yeah,
a little
yeah,
while,
it's like therapy.
because you see the truth in a way that you didn't before, right? Or more people see it, I guess.
Yeah,
And that can be hard. And that's where having a truly generative culture helps you get through the painful part, because people then, if you're in a generative culture, you don't have, the real danger there is that people start saying, well, they suck, that team's terrible, like they're just really bad at their jobs, or and there starts to be a pulling away rather than a bringing together of people, to solve the problem. That's a risk you run, but it's your other option is not knowing, being
yeah.
blissfully unaware of what the hell is going on. So pick your poison, friend.
You can be, it's like attached. You can be, secure or anxious or avoidant with your teams. You want to be secure, but
Yes.
finding out is actually the first part. Like, oh, they're avoidant. Like, great. But now we just know we need to pull them in, and incidents are a great way to do it because usually we all agree that that wasn't something we wanted to have happen, and that starting with a point of agreement is generally how things start to get better. Maybe that's it. We can at least agree something happened. Right?
I'm not sure why.
I don't think I've ever had an incident where somebody joined and said, why? Who declared this? Why? Like, maybe the person who declared it has asked themselves that, but like, you really don't, I don't see people arguing against their existence generally. They
No,
may
and I've
argue for the SEV, right? They may
yeah.
argue for the impact statement, but everybody's like, ooh, yeah, somebody said something happened. We're going to agree that's a thing.
Yeah. I don't really see incidents get rejected. But anyways, maybe that's just a statement about the cultures that I work in,
True. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. We're all anecdotal on that one.
Yeah. Um, we should tell people to write us more questions, because we need more questions.
Yes. How would they do that, Colette?
They would have to go to thisisfinepod.com, and write to us. Also, we have an email address. Hold on a second. I'm going to
A
read it to you.
brilliantly constructed website. This is finepod.com.
We have an email address, and I don't have it in front of me. I think anyway, just go to thisisfinepod.com and click on Ask Us a Question. It'll take you to a Google form, and you can ask us a question. We have some other shows scheduled with the questions picked, but we really need more in order to make this podcast for you all. So
Yes,
please come
please.
ask your questions.
You can also ask us on LinkedIn or
Yes.
Blue Sky. We're on Blue Sky.
Yes.
So, yeah,
I made
just
us a
tag
LinkedIn. I made us a LinkedIn page.
Yeah,
We have a
amazing.
LinkedIn page. You can find us at This Is Fine Podcast at LinkedIn. There's a computer burning with flames. It's, I think, the same logo that we have on all of the podcast platforms, so it should be easy to recognize.
Same on Blue Sky. Yeah.
Cool. All right.
Like and subscribe. Like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe and
I thought
whatever.
I'd never do that.
Is that what we say? Okay, cool.
That's not what we say.
Thanks, Clint. Thanks for chatting today.
Thank you. This is amazing.
I'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.